We'll begin with a reading from the book of Psalms, Psalm 15. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagur be'ohalecha, mishkan behar kodeshecha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emes bilvavo. Lo rogala leshono, lo sol reyehu ra, v'cherpa lo naso al krovo. Nivze beinav nim'os v'sirei Adonai yechabed. Nishba l'hora v'lo yamir. Kaspa lo nosan b'neshech. V'shochad al naki lo lakoch. Hosei lo yimot le'olam. A Psalm of David. Lord, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain? One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart, who has no slander on his tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor casts disgrace towards a neighbor, in whose eyes a lowly person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully even to personal harm and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest nor take a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. We are here to say goodbye and accompany Marvin Diamond, Mordechai ben Asher, to his final rest. Marvin was a beloved husband to his wife Sylvia, beloved brother to his sisters Adele and the late Annette, and beloved father to Robert, Joel, and Marcia. And like King David said in this psalm, setting out who may sojourn in God's tent or dwell on his holy mountain, King David listed a series of virtues, personal virtues of personal respect. And these are virtues that are worth thinking about, especially at this time. King David, in another place, compared a person, a righteous person, to a tree. And the metaphor of a tree is especially appropriate today. Today on the Jewish calendar is the day of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is known generally as the new year of trees. What makes a person compared to a tree as opposed to anything else? I mean, anyone can make up a metaphor, but what's special about a tree? What's special about a tree as opposed to, for example, a plant, which is the other form of vegetation, is that a tree is meant to produce fruit in perpetuity. It is not something that has to be planted every year or every year or two. Marvin was very much into his gardening, and he probably could have explained the differences that exist in different plants. There are some plants that you plant, and then you have to replant them or tend them a year later. Other plants maybe 2 or 3 years later. When it comes to a tree, ideally the way it's meant to work is that once that tree is planted, it can give fruit for dozens, hundreds of years. And it's a very special sign of God's creation that while, yes, we often have to plant things and we have to expend effort, and that effort might last a year, or it may last a few years, or that effort might produce results even for a lifetime. But the symbol of a tree is that a tree ends up producing results that go for several lifetimes. So that it isn't just a matter of one tree that might have produced hundreds of apples, for example. Rather, the idea is that with that tree and with its seeds having gone in all sorts of different directions, that tree lives far, far beyond its own lifetime, in the lifetime of other fruits and other trees that could be anywhere in the region or anywhere around the world. And that is why the Torah says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, that a person is like a tree of the field, not like a plant, but like a tree. And people have consequences and effects of their own actions that go in all sorts of different directions, so that in that way, even in this world, meaning without even considering the next world and the spiritual world, even the physical, material world in which we live, people achieve immortality in that way. So in light of that, I'd like to call upon Marvin's grandson, Nathan, to share some words with us about his grandfather.
How many words can be said about a man who said so few words? My grandfather was not one to go on in conversation, but spent more time listening than speaking. Anyone who ever called my grandfather on the phone knew that a 5-minute conversation was 4 minutes too long. They say that actions speak louder than words. And this is proven in the life of Marvin Diamond. His words were few and soft, but his life spoke a deafening testimony of courage, love, loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication. Born February 11th, 1932, he was the brother of 2 sisters, Adele Zucker and his sister Annette, who died tragically young due to sickness. In my life, I bore witness to his love for his sister, Adele, and her great love and loyalty to him. By 1951, Marvin was serving as a United States Marine. He was a hero. Active duty operations in Korea, and finished as sergeant. I once said to my grandpa, "I didn't know you used to be a Marine." And with a stern look on his face, he said, "I didn't used to be a Marine, I am a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine." I think that's the most we ever talked about service, war, or Korea. There are some things you don't talk about, I remember him once saying to us. Consistent with his life, his words on the matter may have been few, but his actions were loud. He was Semper Fi all the way. And in his last years, when he had to humbly submit to caregivers who so tenderly cared for him, he never lost his toughness. He never stopped being a Marine. 2 years after he was done serving, Marvin married the love of his life, Sylvia Diamond. He worked in retail, but his greatest passions were outdoors. He gardened beautifully and loved fishing and walking through nature. In fact, my favorite and most vivid memories of my grandfather are walking in the metro parks with him, fishing with him, and watching him show off his beautiful backyard and pond. Together, he and Sylvia dedicatedly parented Robert, Joel, and Marcia Diamond, his children, with extreme love and devotion. And they loved him dearly. And his daughter Marcia devoted much of her life to caring for him each and every day. Marvin loved his wife, and he loved his family. If I may so boldly say, nothing more defined my grandpa than his love and devotion for his wife, Sylvia. He loved his wife. I heard a story of a time when my grandma was sick, but still living in their home, and my grandpa would take her on long drives, which was their tradition, and he pulled in the driveway after a long drive, and she said, because of her dementia, "Are we already home?" And Marvin pulled right back out and went back on another long drive. He loved his wife. Though Sylvia later lived in the nursing home and could not really speak, his love was not slowed down and his devotion was not hindered. He retired early, sacrificing much to be with her, and he was with her every day. He stared into her eyes, rolled her around in her chair, and often sat silently with her. He loved his wife. I got to see this with my own young eyes, his never-ending love for her. When her last day arrived and the call went out, my grandpa, who notoriously drove like a snail, was pulled over for speeding to the nursing home. But the stop ended not with a ticket, but with a police escort to be with his bride one last time. And once she passed, he visited her grave with as much dedication. He loved his wife, and he loved his family. I will miss hearing my grandpa speak Hebrew at the Passover table. I will miss short calls to my grandpa. Our tradition was on Veterans Day, I would call him and thank him for his service. He loved that. I will miss visiting my grandpa at Aria, where he was so tenderly cared for. The night he passed, the call went out, and Family came from all around to say their final goodbyes, and as the family was arriving, so was the ARIA staff, many of which who had already worked that day, many of which who were not scheduled to work for a few more days, but they came because they loved him, and he was an easy man to love. They came because they were family too. There's so much we will all miss about Marvin and his beautiful life, but I think for all of us who he touched, his beautiful memory will live on in what he inspired us to be. Grandpa, you inspired us to be more. Not to say more, but to really be more. My grandpa leaves behind his sister Adele and her husband Ron and their 3 children, Marty, Jeffrey, husband of Tatima, and Tammy. He leaves his 3 children, his son Robert, husband of Sherry, his son Joel, and his daughter Marcia. He also leaves behind his grandchildren, granddaughter Anna, married to Harold, granddaughter Rachel, and grandson Nate, husband of Amani. Marvin Diamond, rest well, brother, uncle, father, friend, Marine. Rest well, Grandpa. With love, Nate.
Robert.
Thank you, Nathan. Such a son. It's so comforting to be surrounded by family and friends. You don't know how it feels to be loved and cared for in these moments. It still seems like we're attending someone else's funeral. We looked to this day for many years, and it's finally here. It's hard to say goodbye, except that for the time that I spent with my dad, I told him when he was laying there, I told him, I'm going to see you again, and I trust that I will. Just as we are surrounded by your love and your friendship and your commitment to us, so it was in the funeral home. I mean, not in the funeral, in the Aria house where he lived for 2 years. And he couldn't eat or swallow on a Sunday. We visited him that week. We were all together on Wednesday before he passed that evening. And we were all surrounding him. And we were reminded that the last thing to go would be his hearing and his understanding of who was with him. So we all gathered around him. We all had private time. We shared our love for him. We prayed for him. And we... my sister laid next to him. My brother Joel put his head on his shoulder, and I sat there and touched his face and rubbed my hair through as much as was left. And we loved him. And 61 years of knowing him was a pleasure and an honor. We will miss him beyond words. I know my brother talked to him at least once a week. I know my dad says he calls every Sunday. My brother had so much love for his dad. My sister, Marcia, is a sister beyond words. She's a strong individual, and she had undying love and compassion and dedication to my mom and dad. That was her position that God appointed to her in her life. She served them and she loved them until my mom needed more professional care and until my dad needed more professional care. Even she would visit and dedicate her love and her life to him and to both of them. And she's an extraordinary woman, a cancer survivor, and a dedicated lover of parents and of her family. And Joel and Marcia, I love you. I am guilty of looking at my dad so many times and saying, I'm going to try to do better than you. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better person. I'm not going to make the same mistakes. Later in life, I realized how immature that was. And he was different than me. It's not a matter of being better or more good. It's a matter of being different. I can talk to my children more or hug them more or talk about adolescence or talk about marriage or whatever. And I have a feeling that Nathan and our children will be a different kind of father to their children than I was to them. There's a difference between him and me, but it's all good. He put up with a lot with me, with what I did, with what I believed, with different stands I took. But his unconditional love was always there. He was an extraordinary man. He was a man of courage and a man of loyalty and a man of extreme faithfulness. And that's when I was younger. When I grew older, I said to my wife, the most scary thing about my father is I think I'm growing up to be just like him. And it even down to in Aria, he was laying down in a fetal position, his head on the pillow, resting on his left side, knees up, and my sister said something like, that's the way he was more comfortable. That's the way he usually slept. And I went home that night late because it was already 12:30 once everybody came and did their business, and I went home and I laid down in bed and began to think of my father, and I said, oh my God, I'm laying on my left side, my head on the pillow, my knees up, and I'm thinking about my father, and I think I'm still like him. He was into sports. He went to Glenville High School. He lived on Tuscarora. You remember on Tuscarora? We thought that was the name of the street, but it was on the road called Tuscarora. And he said, do you want to visit on Tuscarora? And I said, sure, I'll visit. And years ago, we got in the car, said, Dad, I want to go to Tuscarora to see where you lived. He was there with his parents and sisters and relatives. And I saw this big white house where he used to live. And it was just exciting to be a part of that part of his life. He was into sports. He could quote teams, players. He put up with me when I was in Little League. I didn't like it, but I did it for him, and he put up with a lot. They stuck me in right field, and he said, that's okay. And the ball dropped every time, but I made him proud of whatever I did. He says, it's okay. You're, as he put it, even about a couple months ago, you were always more musically inclined. So that's fine. So I'm not doing better, I'm doing something different, and my life and all of our lives are touched by my dad. Even seeing him with the American flag and the USMC flag, I'm extremely proud of what he did and who he was. Fathers teach their children many things, not to chew on electrical cords, not to take stuff that's not yours, not to stick your finger in the light socket. But he taught me more than that. He taught me what it's like to be honest and moral and faithful and loyal and truthful, and most of all, how to love unconditionally. And he was always there for us. Like Nathan shared, his faithfulness to my mom was beyond mention. He loved her with an everlasting love. And I know that they're reunited now because they loved each other and they dedicated themselves to the Lord both before they passed away. My dad was a place of security for me. He was always someone I can talk to if I wanted to. He was even younger. I can remember that I had an intense nightmare, and I woke up screaming and crying, and I ran down the stairs. I don't even remember running downstairs. It was like I was floating, and I found the bedroom, and I found his bed, and I went to sleep beside him. He said nothing, and I just fell asleep in his arms. When we woke up, I was wet, he was wet. I don't remember him saying anything. If he did, I don't want to remember. But he was that kind of father. He took me fishing, and I still enjoy fishing and hunting with my kids. Like I tell Nathan, the best part about it, and my dad, catch fish if you want to, but the best part of this is just being outside, being with God's creation, and being at peace and quietness. And I always said to my kids, they said, what do you want for Father's Day? It's peace and quiet. And they give me that once in a while. He was in the Marine Corps, as Nathan mentioned. The only reason why he was in the Marine Corps is that when he went down to volunteer for the service in 1951, the line for the Navy was too long and he didn't want to wait. He went to the Marine Corps line, he got right in, and he began serving. Semper Fi, and he would go, Semper Fi. Semper Fidelis is a Latin term meaning always faithful, always loyal. It's the motto of the Marine Corps, but it was more than that. It was a motto of his life, loyalty and faithfulness. Like Nathan mentioned, he didn't want to talk about the war, and I respected that, but as a young, smart aleck kid, he told me to do something, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, don't ever tell me that again. Don't ever say that to me again. I don't know what he experienced or what he saw, but we never seemed to want to talk about it. His military occupation on the back of his honorable discharge was warehouseman. His service was sea and foreign shore duty in Puerto Rico, September 51. He participated in operations against the enemy in Korea, defense of summer and fall of 52. He participated in the supportive operations against the enemy forces in Korea and in the Korean winter, December through June of 53. And he was finally discharged very honorably. Today, maybe words by the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. are fitting, not because they were spoken by him, but I believe they were spoken about people like my dad, and I know people like you that are here with us. He said, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. He said you don't have to put a noun and a verb correctly in the same sentence to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And I think you'll agree with me that was my dad. He touched many people. Jeff, my cousin, wrote something to us, and Jeff is Marty and Tammy's brother and uncle of Max and Kayla. Kayla's here today. And Jeff wrote, words to my Uncle Marvin. Your words were soft-spoken and kind. You were a gardener just like your dad and your grandpa Oscar. You made your house comfortable for all who visited. The house was filled with love and had pictures of a growing and loving family. I can remember spending time at the house on special occasions and Jewish holidays. At Passover, how impressed I was picking up the Haggadah and watching your lips read Hebrew prayers. You were committed to family, your faith was deep, your essence will always be a part of those you touched. God only knows your fate. If heaven should be short of angels, I feel certain that you, my Uncle Marvin, are there and are welcomed by the many angels close to your heart. Life's journey is filled with only a certain amount of heartbeats. When your ticker stops, your legacy is recorded in truth and spirit. And that was Aunt Adele and Uncle Ronnie's son, Jeff. And they had a great relationship with my dad. Again, I've never seen a closer, more loving relationship of brother and sister than my Aunt Adele. She talked, he listened. They loved each other. They got along together. And he is in our memory. Your parents, my grandmother Bubby and my grandfather Oscar, are in our hearts today. So much can be said about Aria House. It wasn't just a place for him to go and eat a meal and, sit there and watch TV. These people, I don't know if they're here today, but they're family. That's all I could say. It sums it up. We found a place where my dad could receive healing, tender care, meet different people. It was a big group home, and it was a place where we did crafts and music and talked to people. But I never had more of a relationship with my dad than I had in the last 2 years. And a lot of it was due to Aria House. And I will remember those last 2 years as I talked to him about many things. The scripture in closing that touched my heart this week was from Psalm 121. I will lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going now and forevermore. And forevermore is what you are doing now. And we will join you one day as we love the Lord as you did. Dad, I love you. We love you. Semper Fi. Amen.
Close with one last psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binoste sheyar bitzeni, al mei menuchos yinahaleni. Nafshi shovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begeitz al maves, lo yirara ki ato imodi. Shivtcho mishantecho heima yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefonai shulchan neged tzorarai. Dishanta v'Hashem en roshi kosire vaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni. Kol yimei chayai. V'shavti b'veis Adonai la'orech yamim. Psalm of David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in lush pastures. He leads me beside tranquil waters. He restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days. Just want to close with a thought. Of all the stories that are told and all the explanations that have been given by the rabbis over the last 3,000 years about the value of the forefathers and foremothers of the Jewish people, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, our 3 forefathers and our 4 matriarchs. One of the things that the rabbis of the Talmud mentioned repeatedly, and it seems to be a small thing, but after hearing the family's words, I understand it a little more. I just want to share that with you before we go to the cemetery. On a number of occasions, when Abraham did something, or when Rebekah did something in the Torah, the rabbis who commented on these passages said that these people did something special, called in Hebrew, Omer Ma'at V'Ose Harbe. They said little and did much. And you can speak of someone being faithful, or someone being righteous, or someone being great and kind or compassionate. But what they singled out time and time again when dealing with our patriarchs and matriarchs was this specific virtue of saying little and doing much. And I remember as a student in yeshiva, I was maybe 19 years old, going over to the rabbis and saying, I don't get it. Why is that a thing? Why is that a big deal? Tell me what they did, but the fact that they said little didn't really resonate with me. And the truth is, I don't remember the rabbi saying anything that stuck, because it didn't matter. And more, and year after year, I come to understand a little more. And Mr. Diamond's life was certainly an example of that, and his children saw it, and his grandchildren have seen it as well. And I'll just share with you in closing something that I was going to share at the cemetery, but realizing the temperatures, I'll share it with you now, and you'll think about it at the cemetery, which is that when we lay someone to rest, one of the things that we have to do, especially when we are in full view of a cemetery and all the people who are resting there, is that just as Marines know, and just like anyone in the Army, in the armed services knows, is that when a soldier passes, you mourn his passing. And soldiers know how to commemorate the loss of a fellow soldier. That's why there are military rites and military honors at military funerals. But there's another task you have to do on the field. It's not enough just to mourn someone's passing, or not to leave anyone behind and show them the honor of an honorable burial. What you also have to do, if you're a responsible soldier and you have a responsible group of troops, is that you have to make sure that whatever it is that soldier was doing has to now be done by the other soldiers. So that, for example, if a soldier was lost on the battlefield and they realize not only that they mourn his passing, but they realize, my goodness, he was a medic. Someone has to take over those jobs. We can't just go on the march without a medic. Someone take his medical bag. Someone else, does anyone else know what to do? They have to accomplish that specific task. So all of us are busy and we do things, and hopefully we do many good things over the course of our days. But this specific task of Omer Ma'at Ve'osa Harbe, doing much while saying little, that's a task. That's something that has to be done in this world. We rarely think of not saying a lot as being a thing to do. But in this case, I think we've learned that it certainly is. And just as trees are known for their power even while silent, so too that this is a task that we who are left behind, we soldiers, so to speak, when the Jews left Egypt, the Torah called the Jewish people as they left Egypt God's troops as they were leaving. So all of us, in a sense, are God's troops. We have to take over that task of saying little and doing much. We're going to head to the cemetery now. Mount Sinai Cemetery off of Som Center Road. And then the family will receive friends immediately following the interment at the home of the Zuckers, 582 Pinehurst Road in Highland Heights. Yehi Zichro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing.